Two basic admonitions before we begin. First, I've often been accused of being much better at forecasting the past than forecasting the future. And second, I've also been accused of being the Dr. Kevorkian of the New Jersey economy. Very unfair, very, very unfair, but probably due to the simple fact that I forecast fully nine of our last 5 recessions. So you are twice forewarned. What I'd like to do today is look at some of the long-term economic and structural changes and disruptions that are changing America, changing New Jersey, and they're all going to be impacted by transportation changes. First, let me give you one cyclical observation. The current economic expansion this month has turned 107 months in length. It is now the second longest economic expansion in history, second only to the March 91, March 2001 great transmillennial economic expansion. So bottom line, congratulations to all of you. You have now lived through the 2 longest economic expansions in the history of the Republic. But one basic admonition, if you think it's difficult to get something done today, cheer up. The worst is yet to come. Unfortunately, we have yet to invent a boom that lasts forever. The peak of the cycle has serious shelf limitations, and things are going to get a lot harder once we start on the down cycle. The current cyclical position is overarched by structural transformations that have really rendered obsolete the way we thought the world worked in the late 20th century. These are all destined to be impacted by transportation innovations that are now unfolding. I just want to touch on quickly 5 today. First, demographics, the greatest age structure transformation in history, basically the changing of the demographic guard. Second, sustained advances in digital information technology. They are really redefining knowledge-based work, how it takes place in workplace geography. Third, the fading of total 20th century suburban domination. Fourth, the great ecosystem transformation and the new corporate urbanism. And fifth, e-commerce, the great retail apocalypse, the bricks and mortar meltdown. So let's quickly go through them. At the forefront are structural demographic shifts. Bottom line, we are now experiencing the greatest age structure transformation in history. One dimension of this transformation is the fabled baby boom, born 1946 to 1964, the most suburban-centric generation in history. Truth in advertising, one of my favorite academic spectator sports, is terrorizing maturing boomers about their inexorable aging. And I think I spot more than a few maturing boomers with us this morning, but I'm going to spare you that torture, mostly. Baby boom, its rule in the 20th century was really unquestioned. Where the baby boom wanted to live, work, and play ultimately resulted in today's sprawling automobile-dependent suburban development patterns. But that suburban-centric legacy is now fading into history. Suffice it to say, at one time, boomers used to rock around the clock, having a good time. Now they're starting to limp around the block. 2018, the great demographic calamity, the first boomers turned 72 years of age. Their influence on the economy and society is diminishing daily. They consider this a disaster of biblical proportions. Every 7.5 seconds, another baby boomer turns 72 in the United States. That's over 10,000 per day, a pace far outstripping the casualty rate for hunting accidents and car wrecks combined. And that's going to continue until the year 2036. As a result, the generation that once was alleged to have dropped acid in order to escape reality is now rapidly dropping antacids in order to cope with reality. But boomers, for better or for worse, are not going to fade away quietly. They're still going to be a market force for some time to come. But their daily commuting days are mostly history. Nonetheless, their physical capacities are going to continue to reduce their mobility options. They've now come full circle from their childhood. Tricycles, a growing market in the United States. I think we all know what will potentially come next. Now, I should point out to you that demographers are not held in very high esteem in New Jersey. In fact, we have been dismissed simply as academics, sometimes sneeringly so, who can statistically prove that the average resident of Miami is born Cuban and dies Jewish. Earlier, Elaine asked me, why did you ever make a career choice to become a demographer? Well, I responded that while I was an undergraduate, I discovered that I had a real flair with numbers. But then I came to the very harsh realization that I simply did not have enough personality to make it as an accountant. My apology to anybody in the accountancy. Okay. The second dimension of the greatest age structure transformation in history. Millennials, the first digital generation. They have now supplanted boomers as the most powerful demographic. Born between 1980 and 2000, or between 1980 and 1995, they originally looked like this, but not for long. By 2018, they were transformed to this: young adults between 18 and 38 years of age, a rental housing generation, a digital generation wanting 24/7 LWP environments, live, work, play environments. Not surprisingly, their value systems differ greatly from their baby boom parents. The terms experiential, connected, sharing, and passion now dominate American marketing strategies. In fact, millennials are now shaping a new economy of experience, and the economy is reshaping itself to their desires. Bottom line, urban-centric millennials now rule. They have become the prized labor force commodity, eagerly sought by a corporate America that requires next-gen digital talent. And where millennial talent wants to be now drives corporate locational decision-making. Much of the millennial talents to date, their current spatial movements could be described as sprawl withdrawal. But millennials are not immune to growing up. They are starting to get married. They're starting to reproduce. In fact, the era of millennials and the family family raising, really, millennials are now really the cutting edge. And the key question is, will their preferences change in the unfolding era? I mean, they have been the driving force of re-centralization. What's that going to happen? What are their decisions going to mean in the future? Will this transportation mode affect their residential locational decision making? Will they reinvent sprawl as their baby boom parents did originally? A key question going forward. The second disruptive shift is the innovations in information technology, which we're all familiar with. Digital information technology provided the foundation for today's millennial-driven economy, and really the changing structure of our office ecosystems. A quick look in the economic rearview mirror using New Jersey as the case study of a national phenomenon. In 1980, New Jersey's aging manufacturing economy was hemorrhaging obsolete industrial-age jobs and factory inventory. 33% of the state's jobs were still in manufacturing in 1980. But by 1990, 10 years later, the state had remarkably been transformed into a leading-edge suburban post-industrial economy. This was facilitated and sheltered by the great 1980s office building boom. By 1990, 80% of all the commercial office space ever built in the history of New Jersey had gone up in the United States. An extreme example of the national phenomenon. Nationally, 50% was built in the decade of the 80s. New Jersey was typical of the experience of America's frenzied bi-coastal suburban markets. The goldfinch, if you didn't know it, is New Jersey's official state bird. In the 1980s, it was supplanted by the crane, the construction crane. Corporate America was increasingly fleeing an increasingly desperate urban America. This led to the mass migration to suburban freeway and highway-oriented office agglomerations in the suburbs. That was the cutting-edge growth model of the 1980s. Auto-dependent, one-dimensional office corridors and concentrations. Now, that new office inventory that was built housed vast numbers of middle-skilled, white-collar jobs filled by baby boomers. Much of their day-to-day tasks involved 1980s-style primitive information processing and record-keeping, routine, standardized, segmented work procedures from an ancient era. Look at those baby boomers. They do not look very happy at all. But advances in information technology ultimately redefined the very nature of white-collar work, of knowledge-based work. Corporate cultures, business models, and office building models were radically transformed. Teamwork, collaboration, creativity, and innovation now define key office functions. Look at those smiles. See how happy those millennials are in their new work environment? Millennials were the digital front-runners that eventually unshackled workers from fixed-in-place information technology systems. By 2018, let me see, basic outlook, further disruptions in all established business and work protocols, job locational imperatives, and commutation patterns. Disruption 3, diminished suburbanization, demographic and economic. For more than half a century, the dominant spatial force in New Jersey, the dominant spatial force in the broad New York metropolitan region was relentless suburbanization. First people, then jobs. But this dynamic the past decade has been totally disrupted. This map shows in red the counties in the 4-state, 35-county metropolitan region centered on New York City that experienced population losses in the 2010 to 2017 period. So it's the outer edge of the metropolitan area, the 12 outer edge perimeter counties of the 4-state region that are now shrinking. These were once the epicenters of population growth pressures in the late 20th century. So the demographic suburbanization dynamics of the late 20th century have been completely upended. Second dimension, employment patterns. This is reflected by the reversal of economic fortune of the Garden State and the Big Apple. The bulk of the Garden State's economy is in north central New Jersey, part of the New York region. During the long period of broad suburbanization, 1950 to 2004, you can see the numbers. New Jersey added over 2.3 million jobs. New York City added only 81,800 jobs. In 1950, New Jersey was 1/2 the size of New York City. By 2004, it was 14% larger. So the north central suburban New Jersey was the unquestioned regional economic locomotive. New York City, the caboose. The overwhelming growth took place in the suburban arena. But sharp reversal of economic fortune in the 2004 to 2016 period. New Jersey flatlined. New York City experienced the greatest growth surge in its history. New York City, close to 800,000 jobs. New Jersey, 76,000. More broadly, the 4-state suburban arena now finds itself as the caboose on the regional economic train. So this is reflected by disruption 4, the structural transformation of our office ecosystem, the key global office market dynamic of today, the belief that innovation thrives in dense, interactive, multifunctional creative environments and is stifled in insular one-dimension suburban campuses. Bottom line, there is too much old, obsolete suburban product built in an earlier information technology era. The outer suburban office footprint is contracting. It is oversupplied and under-demolished. Oversupplied and under-demolished. Example, 1.5 million square foot building built in 1988 as the global headquarters for Continental Insurance in Cranberry, New Jersey. Just simply 30 years ago. That building is now being repurposed. A once state-of-the-art structure in the process of demolition this past February. It is being replaced by 2 speculative warehouses. At the same time, many others still standing are suffering functional obsolescence. This is the forlorn 40-year-old Prudential office building in suburban New Jersey, long since vacant. This was once one of the centerpieces of Prudential's 20th century suburban growth strategy. The new 21st century Prudential complex in Newark, the current corporate preference. However, the suburbs may not be destined to become an economic wasteland. A number of revitalization efforts are underway. And the question is, will emerging transportation innovations spur such re-suburbanizing efforts, or is this simply a last gasp in a new fundamental era? Now, as a complete aside, while I've just focused on offices and post-industrial knowledge-based work, I know you are all probably wondering about the nation's recent manufacturing renaissance and what it means for the region. Well, I predict the factory of the future will be staffed by 2 employees, 1 man and 1 dog. The man is needed to feed the dog, while the dog's job is to keep the man from touching the computer. Finally, structural shift 5, the revolution in retailing and distribution. Historically, America's core economic competency was shopping and consumption, baby boom driven bricks and mortar consumption. And this old baby boom dominant shopping ethic is captured by the following phrases: born to shop, I shop therefore I am, shop till you drop, spend to the end and die broke, the mall is all, and finally, when the going gets tough, the tough go shopping. This dominant baby boom protocol is what bulwarked America's rich landscape of bricks and mortar shops, but is now being fundamentally disrupted. So we are now facing and confronting the great retail apocalypse, the bricks and mortar meltdown. Clicks obviously have been replacing bricks, and at the same time, e-commerce is revolutionizing our warehouse logistics infrastructure. So what will future transportation innovations bring? Now, for those words you have been longing to hear, perhaps desperately longing to hear, in conclusion, actually that sigh of relief I just heard is premature. My conclusions tend to be very long. Seriously, thanks for paying attention this morning. It has been much appreciated. The bottom line is those 5 fundamental structural changes have really been redefining 21st century America, 21st century New Jersey, particularly in ways not envisioned in the 20th century. But each one of them now is going to be impacted by the transportation innovations of the future. Exactly how remains open to question. In any case, let me finally conclude with a long-standing presentation proverb which says, any old place in a presentation is a good place to stop. So if at this point I've given a good presentation, this is a good place to stop. But if at this point I've given a bad presentation, and this is the result, this is a hell of a good place to stop. Whatever the case, I'm stopping here. Thank you very much.